To play 1950. Verb. To hide one's homosexuality, transgender mannerisms, or transsexuality, much like the members of the LGBTQ community had to in the 1950s. One very popular use of this phrase is in the pop song 1950 by King Princess. Here's a genius excerpt.
I love it when we play 1950. So cold that your stare is about to kill me. I'm surprised when you kiss me. It's an analogy. It's a metaphor. The way that queer people had to hide their love in history, throughout our history, being a parallel to unrequited love, right? So feeling like somebody's being cold to you in a public space, and how that looks very similar to the way that people once couldn't be gay in public. I wanted to pay tribute to that point in history.
Thesis. In the case of Brokeback Mountain, Jack and Ennis play 1950, which ultimately punishes Ennis for putting others' wants before his needs.
You are too much for me, Ennis. You son of a horse and bitch.
That is a legendary excerpt from the 2005 movie titled Brokeback Mountain, a movie that tells the story of Jack Twist and Ennis Delmar, two gay lovers, playing 1950 in the 20th century, over the course of 20 years. The legendary line,
I wish I knew how to quit you,
summarizes the movie perfectly. Two characters meet, fall in love, although that word is never mentioned in the movie, and leave each other's lives for 4 years. In those 4 years, they get married, have children, and live their lives as if they had never met. Jack and Ennis eventually fall back into each other's lives, but not in an ideal way. They play the role of fishing buddies, and about once or twice a year, they meet up at Brokeback Mountain and pursue their love for each other, if only for a couple of days. Upon Jack and Ennis's first reunion, Alma, Ennis's wife, finds out about the affair when she sees the two kissing, and Alma eventually divorces Ennis. Jack and Ennis practically need to be together because, as Jack says,
you have no idea how bad it gets.
Their wives and society wants them to ignore who and what they truly are. They are men who are in love. After Ennis and Alma get divorced, the audience is left with a feeling that can only be described as that happy, sad feeling. In this scene, the audience feels almost glad that the unhappy marriage is over. Ennis, however, does not share the same feeling. So, the audience feels sympathy, or perhaps even empathy, for Ennis. When we see Jack driving and singing in his car, the audience is reminded that there is still some silver lining. Now Ennis can be with Jack. Ennis describes how he still cannot be with him, and he has still chosen to play 1950.
I guess I thought that this means you.
This implies that Jack thought Ennis divorced Alma for him. This is why Jack was so happy in the car. Instead, Ennis chooses to make the decision to give society what it wants, instead of allowing himself to get what he needs, love. We see later that Jack goes down to Mexico, meets with a male prostitute, and ultimately pays for the price for Ennis's choice not to be with Jack. After Jack and Ennis share their first intimate moment together, Ennis is in for a surprise the next morning. He comes upon a dead, mauled sheep. This in turn was caused by their carelessness from the night before. This is most likely the moment where Ennis realizes that he cannot be with Jack. Ennis has things to do. He has a wife, a job, children, a life. He would throw all of this out if he stayed with Jack. The next morning, Ennis says,
"This is a one-shot thing we got going on here.
It's nobody's business but ours.
You know I ain't queer."
Me neither.
implying that this was just a one-night stand and nothing else. The audience and perhaps even Jack know that this is not true. We know that they will begin to love each other, and eventually there will be consequences. I remember talking one day with my sisters. My oldest sister told me that these were her priorities. My needs, others' wants, my wants. Now, at the end of the story, Ennis's character arc is completed. His story is told, and the audience is left wondering whether Ennis still plays 1950 today. The answer is most likely yes, but that still does not mean that Ennis is less of a human being or less deserving of love. It just means that he still has things to learn. Ennis went from an unhappy man in an unhappy marriage to someone who is loved and someone who is lost.